Hey people, welcome back to the Intermediate Chess Speedrun. I'm George and this is episode 3. Today we're going to play some good moves, stick to principles and try and win without losing on time. Because last episode we ended up flagging and losing in a winning position. I learned my lesson, don't talk too much whilst playing chess. Obviously I'm going to talk about my thoughts on a high level, but then after we can go through deeper analysis. I'm also just going to stick to one game this time, and then it gives us more time to review afterwards without me creating a half-hour long or 30-minute plus video. So, no big blunders, no big time usage, just good chess. Let's go. Okay, so had some technical issues, wasn't recording audio, had to finish another game, but we're just going to start another one. Here we go, we have black against Ang 118, and he plays c3 on the first move. Very interesting. When opponents play weird moves in the opening, you can just kind of stick to principles. So let's just put some pawns in the center of the board and see what he does. I'm thinking we go for some setup where we push the pawn, we get the bishop out, close the pawn chain, and then develop our knights like this. Close off the pawn chain, build a nice triangle. Move the bishop and castle the king, and we should be good to go. Okay, and now our opponent has disconnected. Amazing. Okay, more technical problems. Our opponent disconnected. We gained some more elo, even though we didn't do anything. So let's just start a new game, and hopefully we can get an opponent who actually plays the whole game. Alright, we have white. Let's play 1d4 and go for the London. An awesome opening at beginner level, because all the pieces go to the same squares. This bishop comes out first, and then we close a pawn chain. He plays g5, but this is just a pawn blunder. There's no way for him to check us and win the bishop, so we can just take it and come back. And that is actually a free queen, so he pushes, trying to take some central space, but forgot that the bishop now sees the queen, which we can just take. And he resigns. Okay, so let's play another one. Okay, so today's not going perfectly. The first game, audio wasn't recording. The second game, our opponent disconnected. And the third opponent resigned in 3 moves. And now we have a fourth game against someone from South Korea who's playing the Englund Gambit. Again, we had this the other day, and I don't know if they're just gonna, I don't know if they know they're playing the Englund Gambit, or if that was just a pawn blunder. They'll probably put the knight here and attack the pawn. Okay, he checks us. That's not too good because we can just push the pawn and block the check. And now this bishop has to go somewhere. Maybe to b5. And let's see if this opponent also falls for that same pattern which we caught our opponent with. I think it was in the first video that we recorded. This exact same pattern where our opponent checked us, we kicked it with c3, they went back, we played b4 to attack it again. They went back to b6 and we played a4, threatening to trap the bishop. The opponent now has to go here or here so that the bishop can get away. If they don't, we will just trap the bishop. And that is the second time that we use the same pattern to win material. Chess, at its core principles, is really just patterns, and the only way to learn these patterns is by playing chess. So the more you play and analyze your games, the more you see the patterns and the easier chess becomes. I say easy, chess is a very hard game and only gets harder as you go up the ELO ladder. And just like in the other game, our opponent didn't see our threat, and our threat was to trap the bishop. Now, there is a fancy move in chess which I mentioned in a previous video called en passant, which means when your opponent pushes a pawn 2 squares on its first go, and you have a pawn that's standing next to it once it's moved, you can actually take the pawn backwards, which we could do, but we don't need to. We just go a5, and the bishop is trapped. Our opponent has nowhere to check us or put us in any danger. So their best move might just be to sacrifice the bishop on f2. This way, at least they get a pawn for the bishop and they open the king. But it doesn't mean it's necessarily decisive because we can just defend the king and bring it back to its home square or put it on g1. And at the end of the day, we are just up a bishop. So we're going to try and stay up in time. We're currently up about 40 seconds, and they play c5, counter striking our pawns, but this does just blunt the bishop away in one move. And okay, and that was actually also not a good move. That was a bit sneaky because he can't take this because our rook can now take his rook. So within a span of 3 moves, our opponent lost a bishop and a rook. If you see these patterns early on in your chess career, then it all of a sudden becomes a lot easier to find good moves and also win. So, our opponent plays bishop f5. Now we do have a check on a4, which checks the king. The opponent can't block with the knight because we would take the queen with a check. If we check here, the bishop can just go back though, so maybe not the best. This is very strong. So at the moment, this knight is pinned, and something good to think about, or a good thought process to follow when you're playing chess is if you have a pinned piece, is to put pressure on that pinned piece. Now we have multiple ways of doing so. We can either check, he goes back, and we can put the queen on a7, which I think is probably pretty decisive. Although he can, I think it's because he could move the knight and attack our queen, but when we take his queen, it's check. Then we can move ours. Or another way is to play bishop f4 and then push the pawn, which will attack the knight, but it seems a bit slow. So I think the best thing for us to do is to play queen a4 and queen to a7. His best move is to bring the bishop back to d7 and block the check. If he pushes a pawn, we just take it. We don't even have to take it. We can just go to a7 and pick up the knight. But I think if he pushes, we can take it. Then if he blocks, then we have the option to take on b7 with the queen. Yep. So he went back with the bishop to block, and now I think queen a7 is just going to be a free knight, essentially. Because the knight can't move because it's pinned to the queen. We're attacking it 2 times with the queen and the rook. The knight can go to c6 and hit our queen, like I said, but we will win material because when we take his queen, it will be a check, and then we can move our queen. And he doesn't do anything about it, so what we're going to do is just take the knight, and it's defended by the queen, and also, okay, and so he brings the bishop back. That's probably his best move, or to maybe block with a knight, because otherwise we would have just taken the queen. Is there another way for us to put pressure on? We can check again, but he blocks with a knight probably. So I'm thinking we just maybe we go. Let's go bishop to g5. He'll probably castle, and we're up 11 points of material. So trading is a good thing for us. We're currently penning the knight. Okay, so I think we can win material again. Like I said, we can just trade. He's attacking our queen, but we can just, that's fine. And we can't take the bishop because it's defended by the knight. But if we attack the knight, yes, we'll lose our bishop. Or actually, I think a better move is to take on b6 with the knight, because this attacks the knight, and the knight has to move. And when it moves, it stops defending the bishop. Yep. So now the knight had to move, stop defending the bishop, and now we're just going to take the bishop with the rook, check on the king. If the king moves up, we'll take the rook in the corner. So his best move is to block with the knight, but then we'll just take it because it's defended by the rook and the bishop. So yeah, this is not a good game for our opponent, who's just losing all the material, and yeah, they resign. So amazing, we win. Okay, nice decisive game, didn't take too much time for every move, which is good. Let's have a quick review. So computer says we played with 93% accuracy, but remember when your opponent plays bad moves, it's a lot easier to play with a high percentage, especially if you know what the mistakes are, because then the computer's top choice will always be to win material or find some tactic, which is what we did. And yeah, so we played d4, going for London, but he played the Englund Gambit. Now, like I said in the previous game, the Englund Gambit can be a bit tricky when, at high levels, if you know how to play the opening. But I think, if I'm honest, I think this was probably just a pawn blunder. So we took it, and in the last game, or in a game from one of our previous videos, our opponent went to knight c6, played knight c6, attacking the pawn, and we played knight f3, defending this pawn. But in this game, our opponent played bishop b4, check. But this isn't so good because we can just block. We can push pawn one square and block. And yes, we take this square away from the knight, but it also gives us an amazing opportunity to play b4. And just like in that last game, our opponent did not see our threat after the move a4, which was to trap the bishop. They played e5, and yes, we could take here, but this we could take en passant. But this gives our opponent the opportunity to play a6 or a5, save the bishop. So we just play a5, attacking the bishop, and the bishop is lost. The best move was to take on f2, because then at least you'll win a pawn, and you get the king out slightly off. You get the king out to the open, and it can't castle, but this is still obviously winning for white because you're just up a bishop at the end of the day. Our opponent didn't do that, and our opponent played c5. Yes, sure, counter-attacking our pawn structure, but we just take the bishop. And then from here it got even worse because they took our pawn, not seeing that this rook now sees this one, and it's undefended, and we could just take it. Then our opponent played bishop f5, and the computer wants us to play e4, which is interesting. What happens after bishop e4? The computer wanted some knight d2. This is not a very human approach, I don't think, because you just give away a pawn. I think much more human is to play. Okay, computer also wants f4, or no, bishop f4. Okay, bishop f4 was my other idea. I thought it was a little bit slow. I thought that queen to a4 was a little bit more of a clean win because it's check, and when the bishop goes back, queen a7 just essentially picks up the knight because the knight is currently pinned to the queen. And what I was saying in the game is that if the knight goes here to hit our queen, it looks like we trade queens, but when we take his queen, it's actually check, so he doesn't have time to take ours. See, it's in check. So our opponent would have to take with the king or with the knight. If he takes with the king, then we can just move the queen, take on b7, or give another check. So yeah, this was a good way to win another piece. So yeah, they just played knight to e7. We took the knight, attacking the queen, and yeah, they had to block. So bishop c8 was the best move. But then I think the computer wants some b5 or some e3, which makes sense. E3 makes sense because you want to come in and give this check. But I think bishop g5 is also a good move because it pins the knight to the queen. The knight can't move, and if we have the opportunity to trade pieces, we will, because in this position we were up a rook, a knight, and the bishop. Obviously, I thought about if the opponent plays f6, but this is not so good because we can just take on f6. If they take on f6, we take on f6 with the bishop again, hitting the rook. The rook has to move all the opponent castles, and we can just take on a7, queen takes, and then we just get more pieces out. So bishop g5. Our opponent played knight to c6, but then this does just hang a queen. Yes, I take ours, but we can bring the bishop, save the bishop, attack the knight, which is offending the bishop. The knight moves, we take the bishop, and our opponent resigned. Okay, a much cleaner day of chess, with some technical issues at the start and a few games that were aborted, or our opponent resigned in 3 moves, or I forgot to press record on the audio. Eventually we got to play a good game. We found some nice tactics and some good attacks to win material, and eventually our opponent resigned and threw in a towel, and we won the game. We're slowly climbing up the rating ladder. Our next goal is to get to 500, then to 1,000, then to 1,500, and then about 1,700 is where I currently sit, so it'll be my limit. But once we get there, then we'll think about a new series of trying to get to 2,000 ELO. That's a long way off, so don't worry too much. For the minute, we're just trying to stick to principles and play some good, decent beginner chess. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow.